This is Mr. Gillum, and today we're going to graph systems of linear inequalities. Now, hopefully everyone remembers when you graph an inequality, it requires shading, and it also requires whether or not it is a dotted line or a thick line. So this is back from chapter 2. Okay, so graphing a system of linear inequalities. What you need to do is completely graph the first equation, and I want you to specifically shade it with horizontal lines today. So be careful on your shading. I want to do horizontal lines. Then I want you to completely graph the second equation. I want to shade with vertical lines. Now, where the shading intersects, it should make like a checkerboard, and that's going to be your solution. So you need to actually label it solution when you get there. So here we go. We're going to graph the system of inequalities. So we need to remember how to graph a line, and we also need to remember how to graph an absolute value for this. Okay, in the first example, we're given two lines. And remember, y equals mx plus b. And the b value is the last value, and the slope is always the number in front of the x. Okay. In the first one, we're going to graph this by saying, okay, I'm going to start at -2, put my point. I'm going to rise. Remember, slope is rise over run, and in this case, the slope is 3 over 1. I'm going to rise 3 and run 1. I'm going to put my next point. Okay, and because it's a line, I really only need 2 points to graph it, and I know it's a thick line because it says less than or equal to. So I'm going to write it as a thick line. Graph it as straight as I can here. But I'm not done yet because I know in inequalities either I need to shade one side or the other. So I'm going to pick a point. I'm going to pick the point 0, 0 because it's nice and easy to plug into an equation and see if it makes a true statement. So I'm going to plug in the point 0, 0 for that equation. I'm going to say 0 is less than or equal to 3 times 0 minus 2. So 0 is less than or equal to -2. That is not true. No, that's not right. So if that side is not solution, since 0, 0 is on the top half and those are not solutions, I know I can shade the bottom half. But here's what I want you to do. I want you to do horizontal lines. I'm going to draw some horizontal lines on here like this. Okay, you don't need a ton of them. You just need enough of them to where you're going to be able to see your checkerboard. Okay, so there's my horizontal lines. The second equation now is what I need to graph. Once again, I'm going to start at my b value. I'm going to use my slope, -1 over 1. Okay, if there's no number in front of x, it's always a 1. This time it's a -1. So I'm going to start at +4. I'm going to put my first point. I'm then going to rise -1 in the negative direction and run a +1. And since I am using an inequality and it is a line, I'm going to just go ahead and graph it, but I need to be careful because this time it's going to be a dotted line. So I'm going to go ahead and draw my dotted line in here. And continue it all the way through. And because it is a line, you do need to make it continuous. Okay? Now, I'm just ignoring what I already have on the graph. I'm looking specifically for the line I just drew. I need to pick a point to see which side the solutions are on. So once again, 0, 0 is not on the graph, so I can plug that in and see if it's a solution. So now I'm going to go ahead and plug 0, 0 in for the second and see if it is a solution for the second equation. 0 is greater than -0 plus 4. Is 0 greater than 0 plus 4? I'm going to say no. 0 is not greater than 4. I'm looking at this dotted line because 0, 0 is not a solution. I know that this other side must be solution. So I'm going to go ahead and shade this side with vertical lines. And as you can see, we're starting to make a checkerboard here. I'm going to go ahead and label inside this little part my solution. Okay, so make sure you do label your solution. Okay, there's a little example of how to graph a linear inequality system with no absolute values. Okay, let's do another one with just lines. Okay, and this time it's not so obvious that they're lines because they're not in y equals mx plus b form. And so we need to put them in y equals mx plus b form. The first equation, I need to subtract x from both sides. Okay, so now it's apparent that my y-intercept is -3 and my slope is -1. So I'm going to start at -3 on my y-axis. Remember, this is my y-axis, this is my x-axis, and I'm going to rise -1 and run +1. If there's no number here, it's really negative 1, which is really negative 1 over 1. So we're going to go down 1 to the right 1. I'm ready to make my line, but I need to be careful because it's an inequality. I know this line needs to be dashed because there's no equal sign underneath that inequality. So I'm going to write my dashed line in here, straight as I can. I'm going to put my arrows on it because it is continuous. And now the last thing there is to do is just see if a point is a solution or not. Once again, 0, 0 is not on my graph, so I like to use that one because it's easy to plug in. Plug in the point 0, 0. Is 0 plus 0 greater than negative 3? Is 0 greater than negative 3? Yes, that is true. So I'm going to go ahead and say, if 0, 0 is right here, and it's true, I'm going to shade the top half of my inequality. I'm going to go ahead and do that right now. Okay, with vertical lines, because I want to see that checkerboard at the end. Okay. Moving on to my second equation. Negative 6x plus y is less than 1. I'm going to add 6x to both sides. Y is less than 6x plus 1. So now I can see my y-intercept at 1 and my slope at 6, or 6 over 1. So I'm going to start at positive 1 this time. I'm going to pretend like none of this stuff's on my graph. Start at positive 1. I'm going to rise 6 and run 1. Here's my second. Now, I've got to be careful before I connect my dots because once again, I have an inequality, so it needs to be a dashed line. Okay. Now, it's too close to 0, 0 for my comfort. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to plug in another point. I'm going to pick, let's pick the point 2, 1. I'm going to pick that point. If it is a solution, that's the side I will shade. If not, that's not the side I'm shading. So I'm going to plug it in here. I'm going to pick 2, 1. I'm going to say negative 6, remember this is x and y, times 2 plus 1 is less than 1. Negative 12 plus 1 is less than 1. Negative 11 is less than 1. That's true. So I know since 2, 1 is on this side, right over here, of my inequality, and that makes a true statement, I need to shade the left-hand side of my second line. Now, like I said, I'm just pretending like that first graph isn't on there. But as you can see, it makes a checkerboard where the solutions are in this little quadrant right here. So I'm going to label this guy as my solution.